Could large sums could a large sum of money being missing from Daniel Young Kwan's account be the reason for him being missing? As in, could that be why he disappeared? I stand in question of that. Why is it that there were a large sum of money that missing from his account? He goes missing. Remember, paraplegic. That means uh you're only able to say move around. He could only move around with access of a motorized wheelchair, right? Like, subscribe, ID in the Discovery Channel. Yes, ID in the Discovery Channel. The links are provided below. Get that Discovery Go app as well as that ID Go app. You might want to get those two things combined and make them into one, and I'm a Discovery influencer. That's indeed a fact. So, Daniel Young Kwon of Atlanta, Georgia, went missing September 4th, 2019. When Daniel went missing, he was a paraplegic. He couldn't move around with use of his wheelchair, which was a motorized wheelchair, as I mentioned in the opening, right? He had to have a wheelchair to get around. That points to disappearance. If you can only move around with a wheelchair, that's to say someone had to have been involved in your disappearance, as in they had to have had something to do with movement of your wheelchair. You're only able to move around with that thing. So somebody else had to have placed their hands not only on you but on that wheelchair as well. In hiding the wheelchair, getting rid of the wheelchair, something pertaining to the wheelchair, right? At time of his disappearance, both his wheelchair and his minivan were found days after he went missing. Those two things were found at a apartment complex in Lawrenceville, Georgia. Atlanta, Georgia, and then there's Lawrenceville, Georgia, right? Two different locations. Okay, so the apartment complex of where his minivan and wheelchair were found. That's why the individuals that live within the complex are to be questioned, and I'm sure they have. That's going to be very, very questionable. It just has to be. Because once you are in a apartment complex and your wheelchair and your minivan is found there, is to say what happened, what occurred at the apartment complex, right? Okay, so there was a woman who was seen pushing a motorized wheelchair when police showed up at her apartment. At the apartments where it said Daniel disappeared from. So, of course, she's going to look very suspect. Because if police show up at an apartment complex, same apartment complex Daniel disappears from, and she's seen touching a motorized wheelchair, she's pushing it. And remember, as I said, there was money missing from his account. Large sums of missing, not small amounts of money missing. Is to say, could she have had something to do with that? If she had something to do with the large sum of money missing, what was the reason for taking the money? And not only that, what was the reason for possibly helping Daniel to disappear? The money's connected to him, and it's connected to possibly her in some way. The woman who had her hands on the wheelchair, right? Someone would have had to drag him if he couldn't walk, or they would have had to pick him up. Or it could have been two individuals involved. The woman might have been involved at the apartment complex, and it could have been a male involved. Because would a woman be able to, say, possibly taken his life, murdered him or something, and then would she have been able to pick him up? Or would she have did something like that at night and just wheeled him in the wheelchair, right? Possibly maybe his wheelchair needs to be, yes, checked for DNA and all the rest, checked for blood and all the rest, right? A person possibly could murder a person, place them in the wheelchair so they don't have to pick them up and carry them and then wheel them wherever they wheel them to get rid of their body or something in a vehicle or something. And then they could have even used his van to do that. Murdered him, placed him in the wheelchair, knowing that it's a motorized wheelchair. Murdered him, placed him in the motorized wheelchair because I think they do have seat belts. Seat belt him in or something. Get him to the van. Possibly put him in the van. Right. Put the wheelchair in the van or strapped to the vehicle of the van or right, and then taken the van, drove him in the van with his dead body and placed his body somewhere, and then returned back to the apartment location with his van and his wheelchair. And then new police showed up and then was seen, the woman seen pushing the wheelchair. Yes. Because if you have a dead body, if that happened, what do you do with that dead body? The dead body more likely is not around that apartment complex. So it had to have been a vehicle involved. And could it have been Daniel's vehicle? Would somebody go through all of what I just said? Murdering him, strapping him to his wheelchair, moving his wheelchair to the van, putting his dead body in there, driving off, hiding his dead body, returning with the wheelchair, and while they drive his van back to their apartment complex. And then now they know they have to get rid of his van, possibly in his wheelchair. And then police shows up and sees her pushing it. I mentioned that like 3 or 4 times. Police shows up and sees her pushing that wheelchair, right? Or did they use another vehicle? Whoever has something to do with it. Did they just say, well, it would be easier for us to, we got his dead body if that is what happened. It had to have happened some type of way. As in he has to be dead or something. Because usually if money is involved and it's missing, that will tell you that more likely somebody was murdered or something. You're not gonna say, well, let's go hide him somewhere. I don't think. Maybe they could have, knowing he couldn't walk. Maybe they put him out in the woods or something, right? Knowing he couldn't walk and left him there. But it's something about that. As in if she didn't want to get caught, she should have did something else with his wheelchair or something. Instead of being seen pushing it. So I think that's all for that. Yeah. Because I try to think of, could there been something else? Is there something else? As in, at first I was like, was there drugs involved? Could there have been drugs involved? Well, he's an older man, right? For him to be, older, usually your kids speak highly of you. Usually your family speak highly of you, right? But why? What will be the motive or something for if the lady was involved, or somebody she knows was involved? What will be a motive for wanting to take the money? Did they need the money? Did they just feel like, well, I have access to his money, and yet I got to get rid of him so that I can get the money or something? Did he owe one of them money? That's why I asked if there was any drugs or something involved. Drugs don't always have to be involved, of course, for somebody to take money. People do all types of things and get rid of dead bodies, right? So we're on Investigation Discovery. The ID logo stands in the far left corner. Live now, Fatal Vows. New episodes. To gain access is to, yes, need to gain access. You're going to provide who you're subscribed to. Unlock the episodes. Receive audio visual previews or click the play button and you would in fact receive that. Because it's nothing like knowing that, say, your family member was in a wheelchair of all things. That's where stories get sad. That's like a helpless individual. ID Go original series. Recommended for you. Shouts out to Lieutenant Joe Kenda as well as Paulo. That's like, yeah, sad in itself because it's helpless if a person relies on a wheelchair and they get around with the wheelchair and they're the same person that somebody murders or something. Right. So, dear viewers, let me know what you think about the video. May you enjoy your day. I will in fact enjoy mine, and I'm going for now. 1.